This is going to be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Are they going to, is it going to go on for weeks? And
Oh, for sure, weeks.
I literally took one sip of my beverage and the whole side of my face felt like I had a stroke.
One person who was always anti-Diddy and was always speaking about Diddy as a problematic person was 50 Cent. And it turns out that it's just been announced that he's created a docu-series on Netflix. I can't wait to see this. The other end of that, every person who has tried to speak out about this, who has tried to speak out about the industry, the type of people that are controlling the industry, the attacks that people face from the media if they try to speak out, is always the same. They're called crazy. And an example of one such individual who went through those sorts of attacks is...
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things, into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
I got on a plane at 5:30 a.m. Go to this party. I think half the people there were butt naked.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So,
Well, you say you know he's innocent.
1,000%.
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case,
in
the criminal case, no.
Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
Y'all know what this is about. Put your hands up.
She did. And when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
He knows the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes, as his lawyers argue the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.
Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges, but prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged the judge to remand him. Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars. A magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, "My concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors."
What if one forgotten thumb drive, buried in a drawer for nearly a decade, ends up taking down one of the most powerful men in the music industry? A man who built empires, moved millions, and threw parties that people whispered about for years. A man who had the money, the fame, and the lawyers to make anything disappear. Until now, because this time, the evidence didn't come from tabloids, rumors, or jealous rivals. It came from inside the house. Encrypted spreadsheets, mysterious guest lists, patterns of camera blackouts, sudden linen replacements, and envelopes filled with cash being handed out behind closed doors. This isn't just about wild parties or industry gossip. This is about federal charges, about a high-stakes trial that could finally crack open the silence surrounding one of the most untouchable figures in entertainment. And at the center of it all, a former bodyguard who says he saw too much and decided to talk. But here's the real question. Is this the long overdue reckoning of a celebrity who abused his power? Or is it a setup fueled by opportunism, betrayal, and a justice system hungry for headlines? Let's dig into the explosive trial of Sean Diddy Combs and the thumb drive that may have changed everything. For over 10 years, Roger Bonds was invisible by design. He wasn't a performer. He wasn't a producer. He didn't flash money or chase cameras. His job was simple. Protect Diddy. Protect the brand. Protect the machine. He was there for the private jets, the all-night events, the five-star chaos. He coordinated arrivals, scanned crowds, swept hallways for hidden threats. If you were close enough to notice Bonds, it usually meant you weren't supposed to be there. But all of that changed the day he walked into a federal building and slid a thumb drive across the table. According to prosecutors, that drive held everything. Time-coded rosters, encrypted staff logs, and internal chats tied to events across Diddy's properties, from Los Angeles to Miami. And Bonds, he was ready to talk about all of it. It wasn't a random move. He'd been facing serious heat in an unrelated firearm case, and he made a decision: cooperate or go down hard. But what he offered wasn't just gossip, it was a map. A digital breadcrumb trail of what he says were patterns hidden in plain sight until now. The feds gave him a deal, 8 hours of interviews, a full proffer session, and Bonds walked them through the playbook of one of the most private celebrity operations in the world. He says he saved the data years ago, just in case. And now, it's not just Diddy's freedom on the line, it's the reputation of an entire industry built on silence. At first glance, the thumb drive looked harmless. A simple storage device. But once federal agents opened it, they knew this wasn't just some forgotten backup, it was a blueprint. Inside were files with names like guest care, roster master, and event enhancements. Each one packed with rows of coded data, shift rotations, team leader initials, door access logs, linen schedules, time-stamped activity reports. Some files even reference something prosecutors would later call the aftercare window. Over 600 entries used the term guest care. That phrase alone raised eyebrows. Why was it tracked so obsessively? Why did it always seem to line up with late night hours? And more importantly, why were those windows always paired with camera blackouts? Then came the chat logs. Encrypted internal messages with timestamps that mirrored what was found in the spreadsheets. Staff members discussing VIP escort clears, refresh bins, and sudden linen orders following parties where privacy was treated like gospel. One message even mentioned Heartbeat ordering a full wing reset, a name prosecutors say is code for someone very high up. But the bombshell wasn't just the terminology, it was the consistency. These weren't isolated incidents, the same patterns repeated across cities, across properties, across years. Every reset lined up with something missing. Camera footage that mysteriously stopped, router logs showing disconnected devices, and sudden shifts in payroll schedules. To the defense, it's just complicated hospitality. To the prosecution, it's a hidden system, designed to isolate, erase, and control. And the deeper they dug, the more the patterns started pointing to one person at the center. It sounds like something out of a spy thriller, except this playbook wasn't fiction. Prosecutors say Diddy's inner circle used a precise routine to manage the aftermath of late-night events. They called it the aftercare reset. The process was chilling in its detail. It always started the same way. Linens were stripped, curtains removed, carpets swapped or deep cleaned. Entire guest wings were deodorized, restocked, and sanitized by staff working under unusual instructions. And during these windows, the internal security cameras always went dark. Bonds explained to agents that certain technicians had standing orders. Power down recording devices during these resets. Officially, it was for privacy or to protect proprietary decor. But the pattern was hard to ignore. In the guest logs, the term GC start marked the beginning of a reset. GC stop marked the end. Between those timestamps, dozens of movements occurred off camera, behind closed doors, and with limited personnel access. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Each reset was tracked not just by time, but by location, initials, and supply orders. Industrial disinfectants labeled Expedite. Linen orders that tripled overnight. Rooms listed as cleared, then reassigned. Bonds testified that certain cleaning crews weren't part of the regular roster. They came in, worked in silence, and left without ever clocking in digitally. At first, defense attorneys tried to frame this as elite hospitality, just what happens when celebrities throw extravagant events. But prosecutors pulled the logs and showed that resets occurred on random weekday nights with no guests listed. This wasn't cleanup, this was concealment. And as the spreadsheet data lined up with router disconnections, envelope distributions, and chat messages marked VIP escort clear, a picture started to form. One that prosecutors say points to systematic efforts to sanitize scenes before questions could be asked. If the digital logs hinted at something dark behind the scenes, the money trail screamed it. Federal investigators followed the numbers, and what they found wasn't just unusual, it was strategic. According to financial analysts brought in by the prosecution, Diddy's companies made frequent large cash withdrawals labeled event enhancements. The amounts, sometimes tens of thousands. The timing, always just before or just after one of the so-called resets. But what raised the most alarms weren't the withdrawals, it was what happened next. Those stacks of cash never showed up in payroll. They didn't match contractor invoices or vendor payments. Instead, Bonds claims they were stuffed into envelopes handed out in quiet corners of the estates during the reset windows. He says he personally delivered those envelopes, sometimes in laundry rooms, sometimes in back hallways, and always to staff who had performed extra duties. Prosecutors even introduced a photo, Bonds holding one of those envelopes, standing near a corridor flagged in the digital logs. The defense called it coincidence, but the timestamps matched everything else. Then came the kicker. An IRS analyst testified that the company's credit card logs had gaps, missing transaction numbers, right where those cash enhancements were made. When they dug deeper, the card issuer confirmed those entries weren't lost. They were manually deleted. That alone wouldn't prove intent, but matched with chat messages, linen spikes, and camera blackouts, it painted a different picture. One message read, "Refresh team cleared, envelopes ready." The defense argued that envelope payments aren't illegal, and they're not. But prosecutors say it's why they were paid that matters. Because if those envelopes were hush money or off-the-books compensation for things no one wanted on camera, it crosses the line. This wasn't just loose accounting, it was, in the government's words, a system built for silence. And what came next would raise even more questions about who knew, who helped, and who might be next. With the evidence mounting, the courtroom became a battleground, not just of facts, but of perception. Roger Bonds, once the silent enforcer behind Diddy's empire, was now the star witness, but the defense wasn't going to let him define the story uncontested. They went straight for his credibility. They brought up a harassment complaint filed against him by a junior staffer in 2013, accusations of verbal intimidation. Bonds admitted it happened, but said it was resolved internally with no action taken. They pointed to civil depositions from years ago where Bonds had praised Diddy as a conscientious employer. His response? Back then, I didn't have the full picture. Defense attorneys argued that Bonds didn't come forward out of principle. He came forward to save himself from a weapons charge that could have put him away for years. To them, he's just another disgruntled employee trying to rewrite history in exchange for a lighter sentence. They called it opportunism, plain and simple, but prosecutors pushed back, hard. They argued that Bonds' story matched the technical evidence down to the minute. The rotor logs, the linen orders, the financial gaps, the metadata from the spreadsheets, it all lined up, and there was the cooperation agreement. If Bonds lied even once, the deal was off. That's a huge risk for someone inventing a story, so who do you believe? The bodyguard who kept silent for years until he couldn't anymore? Or the defense's version of a man chasing immunity, using just enough truth to protect himself? One thing's certain, this isn't just a trial about actions, it's a trial about narrative, and whichever side tells the more convincing story wins. And then, just days before the trial was set to begin, Diddy made a decision that shook everything. With the walls closing in, Sean Diddy Combs was given a choice: take the deal or take the stand. The plea offer wasn't public, but insiders say it could have drastically reduced his sentence, avoiding the full weight of federal charges that include trafficking, racketeering, and witness intimidation. For most, it would have been a lifeline, but Diddy refused. Standing before the judge in a beige jail uniform, he answered simply, "Yes, I do, Your Honor." A flat-out rejection of the government's deal, no hesitation. Why? According to his legal team, he's not just fighting for his freedom, he's fighting for something bigger. They say he believes he's innocent, that the people coming after him aren't just prosecutors, they're part of a larger system that's been targeting him for years. And that this trial is his chance to push back, not just for himself, but for every black man who's ever felt cornered by federal power. "Maybe I can break the model," he reportedly told his lawyers. "Maybe I can show the world that a black man can win in federal courts." It's a powerful statement, but it's also a dangerous gamble. Because if the jury doesn't buy his story, if they believe the logs, the spreadsheets, the testimony, Diddy could face decades in prison. And this isn't a simple celebrity scandal. This is federal court. The stakes are higher, the rules are tighter, and there's no media spin that can change a jury's mind once the evidence starts coming in. Still, he's betting on public opinion and legacy. He's hoping that by standing tall, rejecting the deal, and forcing the government to prove every single accusation, he can reclaim the narrative. But what he didn't count on was that the industry itself might already be turning against him. Long before the thumb drive, the lawsuits, or the courtroom drama, there were whispers. People talked, but only behind closed doors. Assistants who quit suddenly, artists who stopped working with him, staff who refused to go back to certain properties, but no one said it out loud. Because in this industry, speaking out doesn't just get you blacklisted, it gets you destroyed. Prosecutors say the silence wasn't accidental, it was enforced. And now, with federal documents exposed and more witnesses being called, the industry is on edge. One person who did speak up long before the current trial was 50 Cent. For years, he's taken shots at Diddy, on social media, in interviews, even in lyrics. Some called it trolling, others thought it was personal. But now, people are wondering if he knew something long before the headlines did. In fact, 50 Cent has just announced he's producing a Netflix docuseries that dives deep into the dark underbelly of the entertainment world, starting with Diddy, and he's not the only one. Multiple insiders, from producers to former staff, have begun leaking fragments of stories, always vague, always indirect, but always painting the same picture. An ecosystem of silence, where power buys loyalty, where cameras are disabled, NDAs are signed, and money solves everything until it doesn't. The rumors go even darker. Some have begun comparing the case to Jeffrey Epstein. They point to alleged celebrity tapes, hidden cameras, and coded language in the guest logs. Prosecutors haven't confirmed those connections, but that hasn't stopped the speculation. Because when a powerful figure falls, everyone starts asking who knew, who helped, and who's next. And if the whispers are true, this trial might only be the beginning. It started with a single drive, plugged in during a quiet federal interview. But now the aftershocks are rippling through the entire entertainment industry. Security firms that once prided themselves on total discretion are rewriting their manuals. Clients who once demanded privacy are now asking for transparency audits. Major record labels are quietly sending internal memos warning artists to avoid any closed phone retreats or unsupervised private events. The message is clear, legacy playbooks no longer protect you. Insurance companies are jumping in too. Some are raising premiums for celebrity gatherings unless clients provide detailed logs of who accessed what rooms, when, and why. Others are demanding new protocols, like dual sign-offs for any overnight linen changes or camera shutdowns, all because one former bodyguard decided to keep a backup. One executive put it bluntly, this case cracked the illusion. If it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. And behind the scenes, a quiet panic is setting in. Event planners are being asked to explain their cleaning schedules. Personal assistants are being pulled into HR meetings. Lawyers are reviewing old NDAs and wondering what's still enforceable in the face of a federal subpoena. For years, the entertainment world thrived on a simple truth. What happens off camera stays off camera. But now, that camera's off time has become Exhibit A. And if Diddy's empire, one of the biggest, most protected in music, can be dragged into court by a single flash drive, then every high-powered circle is wondering what their security staff might be holding on to. Because the real fear isn't just getting caught. It's getting outed by someone who knows exactly how the system works. Once the trial began, the headlines couldn't keep up with the pace of revelations. Federal prosecutors opened with precision. No drama, no theatrics. Just data, cold, organized, undeniable. An FBI digital forensic examiner took the stand and walked the jury through file headers, timestamps, and creation logs pulled from Roger Bonds' thumb drive. He confirmed the files were created on laptops registered to Diddy's security team and modified only during Bonds' employment. No edits, no tampering, just raw, original data. Then came the spreadsheets. One by one, the court saw guest-wing access logs, linen delivery timelines, sensor data from estate doors. Patterns emerged. Every time the words GC start appeared, they aligned with inactive periods in the security camera footage. Staff were logged into wings during camera blackouts. Linen orders spiked right afterward. And it wasn't just one location. It was repeated across Diddy's homes in Florida, California, and New York. A former estate manager confirmed her initials appeared in the staffing grids. She testified about being instructed to remove curtains and bedding immediately after late-night events. Not the next morning, not during cleanup, but in the middle of the night, under direct orders. Then came the financial breakdown. An IRS fraud analyst showed how corporate accounts had entries labeled consulting fees that matched cash amounts taken out for event enhancements. The credit card logs had gaps, transactions deleted manually, a clear attempt, prosecutors argued, to keep the real spending off the books. And then they called Roger Bonds himself. He spoke softly, directly, explaining the codes, the shift rotations, and the language used in the chat logs. He pointed to columns labeled event cash, the same envelopes he says he distributed personally. And when prosecutors showed a still image of him holding one, he confirmed it. No flinching. The defense fought back hard. They called him bitter, self-serving, inconsistent. They said his story changed when his freedom was on the line. They showed past statements where he praised Diddy. He countered with context. I didn't know what I know now. But here's what made the jury lean in. Everything Bonds said matched the data, the documents, the logs, the time codes. They weren't just accusations, they were timelines. And if the jury believes what they saw wasn't coincidence, then what comes next could be devastating. As the courtroom lights glared and the nation watched, the trial boiled down to a single question. Is Roger Bonds exposing the truth or rewriting it? The defense zeroed in on motive. They reminded the jury that Bonds didn't come forward until he was cornered, facing a weapons charge in an unrelated case. That's when the cooperation started. That's when the thumb drive emerged. Convenient timing, they argued. They dug into his past. A 2013 harassment complaint from a junior staffer, a missed promotion, a signed non-disclosure agreement, all painted as signs of resentment, of a man looking to cash in his secrets for leniency. They played his own words back to him, statements from civil depositions where he called Diddy a respectful and generous boss. So what changed? Bonds didn't dodge. He told the jury his earlier praise came from the limited perspective of a loyal employee. Back then, he says he didn't connect the dots. But when he reviewed the logs years later, side by side with what prosecutors now know, he saw a different story. And that's what this trial has become, a war over perspective. To the defense, Bonds is a bitter former employee leveraging access for survival. To the prosecution, he's the missing link, the human voice to explain the cold, precise data. And the jury, they're stuck in the middle. That's because this isn't just about proving what happened, it's about why it happened, and whether the story being told is one of corruption or one of revenge. Every spreadsheet, every linen order, every guest care entry, all of it becomes meaningless if Bonds can't be trusted. But if he can, then this case doesn't just take down Diddy. It rips a hole in the fabric of how power has operated, unchecked, for decades. And the next phase could show just how far that unraveling goes. This trial isn't just about Sean Diddy Combs anymore. It's about who's next. Because while Diddy faces decades behind bars if convicted, prosecutors have already signaled that this case could crack open something far bigger than one man's empire. Over 70 civil lawsuits have been filed against him in the last 30 years. Many were quietly settled, others disappeared under NDAs. Now, lawyers representing plaintiffs in those cases are watching this trial like hawks, waiting for their moment. And with Roger Bonds testifying under oath, with his thumb drive entered as evidence, those same spreadsheets could become a fast track through discovery for dozens of civil claims. Subpoenas are being prepped, depositions are being drafted. The ripple is already turning into a wave, and the fear across the industry? Contagion. Because Diddy wasn't operating in a vacuum. His parties were filled with A-listers, athletes, executives, politicians, many of whom relied on the exact same playbook of silence, privacy, and off-the-record access. Now those circles are scrambling. Private security teams are being audited. Crisis PR firms are fielding quiet inquiries. Some insiders are already distancing themselves while others rush to delete old photos, messages, contacts. One global event planning firm even issued a notice to clients: update your staffing protocols or risk losing coverage. The fallout is real, and it's growing, because this case isn't just about what happened behind closed doors. It's about whether anyone should be allowed to build a world so private, so untouchable, that people could be hurt without a trace. And with every new witness, every new document, that illusion of invincibility slips further away. No matter what the jury decides, this trial has already changed everything. If Diddy is convicted, it will mark one of the most shocking downfalls in modern entertainment history. A titan brought down not by paparazzi or tabloids, but by data, spreadsheets, router logs, and the silent man who stood behind him for years. But even if he walks free, the damage is already done. Security firms are rewriting policies. Record labels are tightening contracts. Venue insurers are demanding surveillance access and linen turnover logs. Luxury estates are under new scrutiny, and artists once protected by their status are now checking who has access to their back offices, their devices, their staff. The code of silence that ruled elite circles for decades, it's cracked. Because one man backed up a thumb drive and chose cooperation over silence. What started as a hidden folder buried in a drawer has now become the centerpiece of a federal trial, industry-wide reform, and possibly a chain reaction that could expose even more power players. Whether this ends in conviction or acquittal, one thing is clear. The era of absolute discretion is over, and in its place, a new rule is emerging. Receipts never lie. So ask yourself, was this justice? Or just the opening move in a much deeper unraveling of the world's most protected elite? So now you've seen it all. The spreadsheets, the blackouts, the envelopes, the betrayal, the courtroom silence that echoes louder than a headline ever could. This trial isn't just about whether Sean Diddy Combs is guilty or innocent. It's about how far power can stretch before it finally snaps. It's about the systems built to protect the powerful and what happens when one insider decides to flip the switch. But maybe the real question isn't about Diddy at all. Maybe it's about the silence. How many others built their careers behind shut doors and camera gaps? How many voices were buried under cash, contracts, and NDAs? And how many more thumb drives are out there, waiting? Because when someone like Diddy gets dragged into court by someone who used to guard his front door, you realize this isn't just a scandal. It's a warning. The age of secrets is ending. The receipts are everywhere. And now, even empires can be undone by a single backup file. So what happens next? Well, that depends on who still has something to hide.